Welcome to the first episode of the podcast, Stories Pure and Impure. My name is Peter Marlton. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. Here we are. Tonight's the night. Today's the day. Now is now. I'm totally psyched. Wheels up. Here we go. We're going to talk about literature, film, theater, anything with even a hint of narrative. We'll talk about all that. We'll talk about dreams. We'll talk about stories we tell ourselves, which is kind of what happens with dreams, whether we like it or not. We're going to talk about self-deception. Those are stories we tell ourselves as well. Stories we tell each other. Lies we've told. Lies of omission. There's nothing really limited in this. We're just going to talk about stories and the impression that stories have made on us. Now, these two words, pure and impure, yes, they have a religious connotation, they have a moral connotation, and that's cool. We're open to those interpretations as well. But they're not meant to be distinct categories. It's not like we're going to talk about a story, whether it be, literature or something that happened to you or whatever. It's not like we're going to, try to plug that in to impure or pure. It's not like somebody's going to go, oh my God, that story is so fucking impure. And then have to plug it into the impure. That's not how this is going to work. I don't think you'll hear anybody say that in this podcast, but it's possible. They may say that and not mean it to be plugged into the category. Because you know what? Anybody can say whatever the fuck they want on this podcast. That goes for the guests. If anybody out there, wants to text me, which I'll tell you how to do that later, you're totally welcome to. It's open to everything. The main thing is I want to have fun with this, and this is one of the ways I have fun, talking about stuff. So, why am I doing this? I love stories. I'm a writer. I've written stories all my life. And I've been thinking recently, which is what led me to this podcast, what is it about stories? Why do we need stories? I mean, we've got plenty of evidence throughout the millennia that we need stories. And I think part of it may be that we generate stories whether we like it or not. And I'm interested in having, other people's point of view on this. But what I was thinking is, because we're always thinking, we're never not thinking. And one of the things I learned, Jack Kornfield, who's a very well-known Buddhist teacher, he teaches down in Marin County at Spirit Rock. I was at a meditation retreat, and one of the things he said was, the brain generates thoughts like the mouth generates saliva. And what he was trying to tell people is that, when you're meditating, don't try to eliminate your thoughts because you can't. They're always going to come. In the context of meditation, it's, what do you do when they come along? You don't resist them, you let them go, that sort of thing. So, many of our thoughts, maybe, I don't know what percentage, I'm not going to try to give a number, but many of our thoughts become stories. So, it's hard to imagine living without stories, I was trying to imagine that. I think we'd be like Twilight Zone characters, empty vessels with beating hearts with nothing to do but eat. We couldn't even feel anxiety because anxiety requires a narrative, something that you fear, which is like a story, and we wouldn't have the benefit of being zombies. We wouldn't be dead. We'd just be these, sort of machines walking around. I think that would be very weird. But then again, if you were that way, you wouldn't even be able to think of the word weird, I think. Anyway, it's kind of a fun thing to talk about or to think about. So I'm going to have guests come in and join me for episodes, tell their stories, talk about ideas, that sort of thing. Two of them are Doug Mora and Bryn Gribben. Doug and I have been friends for many years. We've traveled around Europe together. We do a lot of stuff around town together. His last name is spelled Mora, and he has a podcast called You Want Mora? and which is very funny to me. And, it's sort of a potpourri, if you will, a smorgasbord of topics. He talks about, literature and film and all these artistic things. And he also talks about business. He talks about parliamentary democracies in Europe. But the thing I like best is he talks about having an artgasm, as a response to something, you see, obviously. So if you've never had an artgasm, when Doug comes in, he can tell you how, how to go about that. What's the most likely thing to bring you to an artgasm? So I'm looking forward to Doug coming in. Also, Bryn Gribben. Bryn and I have been friends for years and years. We met in like 1990s. We live in the same house together up on 12th Avenue and 12th Avenue East. And if anybody is listening out of town, this is all about Seattle. So Bryn is brilliant. She's an English professor, with, focusing on Victorian literature. She's written a lot of poems. One of the things I love about Bryn is she's fucking hilarious. First time I met her, we didn't stop laughing for like a week. And it's been pretty much the same ever since. So she wrote a really wonderful book that I've read and I want to recommend to you. It's called Amplified Heart, an Emotional Discography. I'll say that again. Amplified Heart, an Emotional Discography. And the blurb on Goodreads is, it's a collection of essays linked by Seattle-based poet and essayist Bryn Gribben's love of music. From childhood memories to grown-up loves, music carries this book from joy to heartache and back again. In this extraordinary debut, Gribben shares the most important and poignant moments of her life to a soundtrack that evokes a sense of what music means to all of us and how it can carry us through on a tide of emotion, which is basically exactly a mirror of, what I'm trying to do here. So I'm really looking forward to Bryn coming in. So the approach here for Stories Pure and Impure will be focused on experience, what stories do to us, which is exactly what she's talking about in her book there. I want to avoid detailed critiques of literature or anything else, well, it was a good movie, but it had a bad ending, or, I'm not interested in any of that shit. I don't care about any of that. We can go on Google and hear that, or read that. I'm interested in what stories did to you or do to you, a particular story or a group of stories. And then that includes stories, interpersonal stories or intrapersonal stories, if you're thinking about, self-deception or dreams, because that's what's most interesting to me. So, if you read something or whatever your experience is, however you came in contact with that, did it move you? Did you cry? Did you laugh? Whatever. Did it make you think differently about something? And did you resist that? Did it make you, did it kind of shake up your kind of fixed notion about something? Did it change your life? Which is a big question. For me, I went to see a movie once and it actually did change my life. No shit. I'm not kidding. I saw Midnight Cowboy when I was 17. I was living in LA. And if you haven't seen Midnight Cowboy, you please do, because it'll help you get really in touch with your own humanity. Not that maybe you don't need that, but, always an opportunity for that, I think, is a good thing. When I came out of the theater, I was like fucking weeping. I was so broken up. And I think, so that was the sort of the sad part. The happier part was when Joe Buck is walking, when he finally gets to New York and he's walking around New York, this cowboy hat in the middle of this sea of people, and the guy in the suit lying on the sidewalk outside of Tiffany's, and, Joe Buck's scene with Sylvia Miles, when he meets Ratso later on. It's like, I saw all that shit and I'm like, that's the place. That's the place for me, man. That's where I belong. And so what's interesting about that is, it brings to mind, weeping like that for Ratso Rizzo. Like, what is it about us that we can become so emotionally connected to fictional characters? We know they're not real. Of course, we're not thinking that when we're experiencing it. But the other thing is, like, when you think about books, right? and you think about little black characters on the page that make words that somehow manifest in you a feeling of emotional connection or investment into what happens with a character. And of course, that's a piece of paper. We know they're not real. And as a writer, I strive for that effect, of course, right? There's a British philosopher named Colin Radford who argues that feeling emotion for fictional characters is irrational. And I'd love to hear people's thoughts about that. When you think about it, I guess if you're watching something like Midnight Cowboy and half your fucking brain is imagining, gaffers and electricians and set decorators and lighting people and, while you're watching it, well, the fuck, yeah, it's going to probably be irrational because there's a part of your brain that's going toward, the mechanics of making the film, for example. But if you're not doing that, how is it irrational? I don't know. The thing is, like, I sort of get what he's saying. If you take that scene in Midnight Cowboy, and again, if you haven't seen the movie, I'm going to talk about the ending here. So you might want to tune off for a bit. But the ending of Midnight Cowboy, there's Ratso Rizzo, who's been trying to get to Miami for the whole movie. And even that scene where they're cold in the apartment and the Florida orange juice advertisement comes over the radio. It's just all these moments, you're reminded that he wants to get to Miami. And so what happens, he pees on himself on the bus because he's all fucked up, and Joe Buck gets him a nice sort of tropical-looking shirt. And, as he's driving into Miami, he dies. And so there he is on the bus, Joe Buck's arm around him, with Ratso's head against the window, with his eyes open because he just died. And he's driving, he's finally getting to Miami, and you're just fucking destroyed. And Schlesinger, it was a genius directing job in that movie. I don't think there's a single frame in that movie that's flawed in any way. And so Schlesinger films that brilliantly because he films it from the outside of the window of the bus. And so there's some sirens outside. So there's Ratso. You see him against the window, dead, and then as the bus is going by, you see the reflection of Miami sort of washing over him. You see palm trees, and you see water, and you see sunshine, and it's just fucking devastating. I don't know anybody who's seen that movie who wasn't really just so moved by it. But, if you're thinking about Colin Radford, I don't know. Imagine Colin Radford or someone else who agrees with Colin Radford. You're watching that scene, which probably, most of humanity would be like weeping. But it's true. Once Schlesinger says, "Cut! Lunch!" Dustin Hoffman gets up out of the bus, right? Or the fake bus, because that's probably on a soundstage. But, he gets up out of the bus. He goes to craft services. He picks out a couple of, chicken breasts and some mashed potatoes or whatever and a Coke, sits down, hangs out, talks about what's going on with the Mets, and just waits for the next shot to be set up. And yeah, if you're thinking that way, then it probably is irrational. I guess if you're thinking that way, you wouldn't be connected emotionally. I don't know. It's something fun to talk about. Now, I did mention self-deception a few minutes ago. There are two kinds of self-deception, I think, maybe three, but I can only think of two. One is that you deceive yourself about a decision you want to make. The other is that you deceive yourself about something you did or something that happened. Like, I think I did a really good job when whatever happened just collapsed. mean, you can think of construction or whatever. An executioner who blows it. Well, it seems like I did fine. Anyway, but the self-deception that's really more interesting to me is the one where one part of your brain is telling the other part of your brain, all these lies and justifications for whatever it is that you want. And then, you eat it up, you cling to it, you want to believe more, tell me more, and the bullshit keeps coming, it's disseminated very quickly. And that part of you is sort of gleefully giving it to you. And then when you finally get enough to cross that threshold, you can step into your life and go forward and make as many bad decisions as that particular self-deception leads you to. How does that happen? We're like one brain, Anyway, so I want to tell you about how I got the title from Stories Pure and Impure. I got it from Colette's book. Colette is a wonderful French writer. She wrote a book in 1932. It was published called The Pure and the Impure. And I'll read you a little bit about it. She was about 50 or something at the time. And she considered it to be the nearest I shall ever come to writing an autobiography. And so I saw this and I saw the title and I was like, oh, wow, that's a perfect title. So the blurb in the back of the book says, this guided tour of the erotic netherworld with which Colette was so intimately acquainted begins in the darkness and languor of a fashionable opium den and continues as a series of unforgettable encounters with men and especially women whose lives have been improbably and yet permanently transfigured by the power of desire. And I haven't finished the book, but it is a series of conversations and a series of non-gratuitous erotic sexual scenes between her and her partners. And, it's her way of trying to, examine her life within that context. So it's well worth reading. Now, every episode of Stories Pure and Impure will have a purely impure writer or nonfiction writer, filmmaker, whatever. And of course, Colette is the purely impure writer of the day. Now, I'm going to introduce her with an impression of Garrison Keillor. If you know Garrison Keillor, okay, he did the Writer's Almanac and the Prairie Home Companion, which I never gave a shit about, but I thought he has a good voice, a sort of a pompous voice. Something weird happened to him, if anybody doesn't know, or if anybody knows what it was. But for anybody who doesn't know, something happened to this dude. He was like the pinnacle of what I would call middle class and upper middle class sort of culture. And whatever he did, he lost his job and he disappeared. And the whole story, the whole Prairie Home Companion took place in this fake town called Lake Woebegone. And I think the key words there at this point in Garrison Keillor's life is be gone, because he disappeared. God knows where he is now. Maybe he drowned himself in Lake Woebegone. Maybe he's paddleboarding around it. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to give this a shot, see what you guys think. Maybe I will engage in self-deception, thinking, well, that went well, when it went terribly. But we'll see. Anyway, this is the Writer's Almanac. Okay. Welcome to the Writer's Almanac. Today, January 28th, 2025. Today we celebrate the birthday of Sidonie Gabrielle Colette, known throughout the world as simply Colette. Born January 28th, 1873, in a small village near Paris, Colette was a prolific writer, journalist, some might say libertine, who, among her other adventures, performed at the Moulin Rouge in Paris and wrote many books about her experiences on and off the stage. She was a free spirit. Colette was a woman who lived her life the way she wanted, and she appeared not to care about what other people thought of her. She died in Paris on August 3rd, 1954, at the age of 81. Imagine the arc of Colette's amazing life. She was born at the end of the Impressionist movement, which roughly coincided with the beginning of the Belle Epoque. She published 4 novels by the time she was 20, all about a young woman called Claudine. The first was Claudine à l'école, Claudine at school. Colette knew all the artists and writers in Paris. She did all she could to help Picasso get through his blue period. She was remarkably prolific throughout the 1920s and 30s, and she was recognized as France's greatest woman writer. She lived in Paris throughout the Nazi occupation from 1940 to 1944. The Nazi beast left her alone. She continued to write and publish throughout the war. Read her work. Start anywhere. And that's it for the Writer's Almanac today, January 28th, 2025. Be well, do good work, and keep touching yourself. Okay, that's it. That's my impression of Garrison Keillor. Any feedback? Okay, I get the point. You made your point well. Okay, so I want to say, I am a writer. Like I said, I've published a novel. It's called Eternal Graffiti. It's available at Barnes and Noble and Amazon. And I've written tons of stuff over the years. Modern love story in the New York Times, essays, screenplays. Published some of it, not all of it. But I've never made a living at it. I've had about 50 terrible jobs, maybe even more than that, most of them minimum wage. When I was 15, I dropped out of high school and had no skills, no credentials. All I knew how to do was play guitar. So, what I want to tell you about is a short little anecdote about the best job I ever had, which is driving a taxi in New York City. I did make it there. I got there. It took me 2 years after seeing Midnight Cowboy. But when I got there, it was just as incredible and amazing as I thought so. So cab driving, quickly, it's a war. You get out on the street, you get out on the street and everybody in a yellow car without a passenger is your fucking enemy because you're all after the same thing. And sometimes there's not many people out there. Sometimes there are magic nights, which I'll get into in a later episode. Sometimes there are bad nights. I was robbed 8 times, thought I was going to fucking die. I mean, I thought that one time I thought I am going to fucking die here. And if I wasn't going to die, I was going to get the shit kicked out of me, maybe a few ribs broken. But today, in today's language for me, because I love words, I thought I was going to get maimed. You never hear that word anymore. I thought I was going to get maimed, but I didn't. So this is one little anecdote. Just because there's so many characters in New York City, man. It's so much what I love, and that's what was true in Midnight Cowboy. And I lived it. I got a chance to fucking live it, and I stayed there for 12 years. I was in a band and playing gigs all over the place and driving a cab. Anyway, so here's a quick anecdote. So I'm about 66th and Broadway, and I pick up this guy. It's near Lincoln Center, and he's got a bag of groceries and some flowers sticking out of the bag of groceries, and he's hailing me going uptown, and so I pick him up, and he's all excited. He's like, "Hey, thank you very much for picking me up. I'm going up to 92nd Street." He goes, I'm so excited because, I haven't seen my daughter in a long time, and I'm finally going to see her. She's having a birthday party, and, we've been kind of estranged, and this is a big moment for me. So thank you for picking me up. We got to go to 92nd Street. I'll run in, I'll get the presents, I'll come back out, and we'll go over to the east side. It's, Madison and 67th Street or whatever it was. And then, yeah, and so thanks. He kept thanking me for picking him up. Like, well, of course I did. Anyway, we get to 92nd Street. He gets out of the car and he goes, hey, listen. Just, I know how shit goes down in this city, man. I know the kind of shit that happens. So look, I'm going to leave the grocery bag in the car. I'll be right back. And so don't worry. Okay. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. And I really like the guy. We had a great conversation. We even had a few laughs on the way there. So plus, I was genuinely really happy for him, because he's reuniting with his daughter. Right. So I watch him run into the building like he's genuinely in a hurry to go get those presents. And then I wait, and I wait, and I wait, and, the fucking guy's not coming out. He's not coming out. And this is early in my cab days, so I would know better next time. But this motherfucker just ripped me off. So I say to myself, I better go back and take a look at that bag of groceries. So I open the door, get out, open the back door of the cab. I lift the bag. I look in the bag, and it's full of garbage. It's full of fucking garbage. The flowers are dead. I never really got a good look at them before. The flowers are dead. And the garbage is like what you would see like in a trash bin on the corner. I mean, I think he just emptied out a trash can, threw it in a bag, and all because, he didn't want to take the subway, didn't want to take the bus. He's like, I want to take a fucking cab home today. So that's what he did. Anyway, so that's one of many, many stories. I thank you very much for hanging out with me for this first episode of Stories Pure and Impure. I wrote the podcast, produced it. The music is mine. It would be great to hear from you. The website is storiespureindimpure.buzzsprout.com. That's BUZZSPROUT. You can send me a text. There's a link above the episode description. And thank you so much.